Really interesting. It's really interesting that people believe that success is in the destination. That success actually is the destination. And and people what's interesting about that, they believe that they can avoid they want to like what we want to do is avoid the journey, right? When in fact failure isn't the the destination, but it's also not in the journey. It's not the journey. Failure is the destination. Many people believe that. Well, first of all, let me just tell you why success isn't the journey. Why success isn't the destination, but it's actually the journey, and why is failure the destination, not the journey. Why we have to do the things like we hate in order to get there. I'm going to show you how stopping being stuck, how growing through to get there, and how reaching the vision through all the lessons learned, that's where the growth happens. Right? You become the person who can do the thing to have the bling, and not just have the bling right now, but have the bling so that you can pass on the thing to your family and your descendants so that they can also have the bling. Right? And so what we're going to talk about this morning in our business Bible study is how I had to do all the things I hate, how they had to do all the things we hate in order to get there, to get to the success. And when you see what those things accomplishes, or what you see what those things are in the examples that I'm going to show you, you'll see how God's grace and how his mercy and how his hand is in it all. And when his hand is in it all, there's nothing like the vision that he's given you for your life, the vision that he's given you for your family, the legacy, the vision that he's given you for your health, the vision that he's given you for your wealth, the vision that he's given you for your home and for your hands, the work of your hands, the vision that he's given you for all those things for your destination, for your transformation, the vision that he's given you for your assignment, and being in alignment with that assignment, how that vision, everything, everything like he's done with me. And you'll see in the examples that I've done, I'm going to show you how he's done with many others before me and before you. He's going to do the same thing for you. But you got to be willing to do the things that you hate so that you can be able to do the thing to get the bling, right? And so I'm gonna share with you a couple stories, but it reminds me of, like, when we think about the journey, there's three people I'm gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about Abraham. We're gonna talk a little bit about Moses. We're gonna talk a little bit about David. Talk a little bit more about David. But before I talk about David, Abraham, Moses, you know who I'm gonna talk about? I'm gonna talk about Adam Sandler. Like, wait, Adam Sandler? Like, how does Adam Sandler fit into a conversation about Abraham, Moses, and David, King David? Well, Adam Sandler did a movie back in 2006 called Click. And the movie, you may be familiar with it, you may not be, depending on your age. But the movie that he did called Click was a movie where he was this executive. He was a husband and a father, and his desire was to have a wonderful, family life. His desire was to rise through corporate America, and he didn't. He started at the bottom. Like, he started, like, I can't remember if it was the mail room, but somewhere really, really low, right? And his desire was to be an executive, right? The top executive. His desire for his family was to have a wonderful life as a husband and as a father. However, he he didn't want to go through the journey. Like he wanted to pass through all the stuff that it takes to be a wonderful husband. He wanted to pass through all the things that it took to be a great dad. And he wanted to pass through all the things that it took to be an executive that could run this major company and make a lot of money for the company, but also be able to provide for his family. And so he was given this thing. It was a remote control. It was a universal remote, and the universal remote. It was told to him that if you use this universal remote, you could actually forward fast through your life to get to different places where you want to be in your life. And so he tested this thing. He was testing it, and he kept forward fasting through the 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 tough parts, the parts that didn't feel good, the parts that we don't enjoy. Like we all have that in our journey, right? We always think that the success is the destination. When and so we want to avoid all the tough stuff in life. Well, Adam Sandler did a movie about actually doing that, and what turned out, how it turned out was, well, I'll tell you in the end how it turned out, because you'll see how when Abraham, he went through similar things. He had Abraham was made some serious promises by God. And what was his promises? Abraham had a vision that he would be a great man. God gave him a vision that he would have a wonderful family, and and he would be able to follow in his father's footsteps. But yet, as Abraham got older, he he had no children. And Abraham was living under his father's roof. He was living in his father's land. And Abraham was growing as a man, but he still had no family. He still was in his father's land. And then eventually his father passed away. And the Lord told Abraham that he would have to move, right? He needs to move and go to leave the land of comfort under his father's land, where he was very familiar, to go into a land he had no knowledge about, which was the promised land, which is today Israel, Canaan back then. But Abraham had no idea. He just had to walk out on faith. He was challenged at that point. When you think about Abraham moved from his father's land. He believed God for that vision, and he he went. But as he was going through that journey, God continued to give him vision for the greatness that he had for him. And he told him that your descendants, I'm going to bless you with descendants that are so many that you'll be able to count them only if you could count the number of stars in the sky. And so Abraham he believed him, but he was challenged in that belief. He was challenged in that belief because he was getting older. And he was challenged in that belief. He was actually 80 years old, 83 years old, and 87 years old. And he got to a point where he and his wife, Sarah, they were like, should we still keep doing this? Like, should we still keep waiting on God? Is that just something you wanted, or is that something that God really said? And to the and Sarah just eventually said, you know what? I'm gonna bless you. Like, let me just give you my servant, and you could take my servant, you'll make her pregnant, have a baby through her, and then that may be how your descendants will grow. Abraham listened to his wife, but didn't gain counsel from the Lord in that. Because if he would have gained counsel from the Lord in that, it didn't, he would have gotten the answer that he didn't want, which was, no, that isn't it. Like, you're gonna have to wait some more. How long, Lord? Until I say so. Right? That was the easy thing to do. How many times do we look at the easy thing to do versus the hard thing to do? The easy thing that we don't, that also feels good, that it also maybe looks like what everybody else is doing, when God has a different plan for us. That doesn't feel good. That's the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Well, that was what God would have told Abraham to do. Why? Because God said, no, my covenant, your descendants that I'm talking about are not going through your wife's servant. It's going to go through your wife, Sarah. And that's the covenant that I will have with my people, through you and Sarah. And so Abraham had the baby. And at 99 years old, God said to him, all right, now it's time. He's like, what do you mean it's time? It's time. It's time. I'm about to bless you and Sarah with a child. And your descendants, I'm telling you again, will be as vast as the number of stars in the sky. And Abraham said, okay, Lord, I believe you. And the Lord said, because you believed me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change your name. In fact, I'm going to change your name from Abram, which is the exalted father, to Abraham, which is the father of many nations. I'm going to change your name from exalted father to father of many nations. And I'm going to change your wife's name from Sarai to Sarah. Right? And oh, by the way, I got something else for you. What is that? I want you to be circumcised. You and your son and every male in your household that's 8 days or older. I want you to do that so that I can continue my covenant throughout your generations, so that I will be their God and they will be my children. And at 99 years old, Abraham, he had a choice to turn away from what wouldn't feel good. Could you imagine? Could you imagine being circumcised at 99? Could you imagine being circumcised at 10 or 5 or 20 or 3? Like, his son Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised. And all the men who Abraham employed, all the men that was under his family, were also circumcised to get the bling. He did the thing to get the bling. And you know that there's other things that happen with Abraham, even where he was called to sacrifice his son Isaac. And like, wait, Lord, I did everything you told me to do. He could have said that. He didn't. He continued to do the thing that he hated, which is, I don't want to kill my son. I'm going to break my wife's heart. Lord, I know you could bring him back, but this is going to break my wife's heart. But I'll do it because I love you. I'm going to do the thing to get the bling. I know that I wouldn't have all of this if it wasn't for you. You've been faithful in everything. And I know that it's all because of you. I know because you love me and you cannot lie. Right. And so he did those things. Think about things that you may be going through in life. Like I think about, for me, the things that I go through in life. There's things that I would love to be able to just use the remote and forward fast through, because it doesn't always feel good. God's given you a vision, and the vision is so great. Vision for you and your family, vision for your business, vision for your health, vision for your wealth, vision for your finances, right? Vision for your business, vision for reaching people that God's giving you gifts to be able to help, right? And like you could see it so clearly as far as what you're capable and how you're going to make a difference and how he's going to use you. You got a heart as a willing vessel to be able to do God's work and whatever and act in your greatness. However, you realize it ain't just happening overnight and you got to go through all this stuff. Sometimes you got to spend more money. Sometimes you might even have to go broke. You might already be broke, right? And you're going through these challenges, these tests. You may be humbled in so many different ways by the journey that you have to go through, but yet you know that it's what you have to do, the thing that you hate, so that you can become the person that's able to do the thing to get the bling. Well, when you start talking about humble, what does God say? God says he shows grace to the humble, but he resists the proud. Do you know who the most humble man to walk the face of the earth was? Moses. Moses was the most humble man. How do I know? Because it says it in the Bible. He was the most humble man to walk the face of the earth. Now, think about his journey. Moses had a journey where it started when he was a baby, where Pharaoh was killing all the kids. Pharaoh wanted to kill all the babies. He killed all the male babies that were being born throughout Egypt, Hebrew babies. He killed all of them. And his mother was led by the Spirit to take that baby, Moses, and send him off on a journey in a basket along the river. In that journey, in her faith, God led Moses to Pharaoh's daughter. And Pharaoh's daughter raised that baby as her own, took the baby, raised the baby as her own. Now, there was speculation that she was already pregnant and she had lost a child. And so no one questioned it. So it was her little secret that Moses, this Hebrew baby, was the baby that no one knew she had lost this baby. So she raised it in Pharaoh's castle in his kingdom as a prince. He was going to be next in line for the throne, Moses. So his journey started as a baby. Then, after killing an Egyptian master for abusing one of the Hebrew slaves, he had another journey. He had to flee Egypt so that he wouldn't be killed or held responsible for killing that taskmaster, protecting a Hebrew slave. So he did that, and he had to journey through the desert. His first journey through the desert, no longer a prince, but as a rejected man. The total opposite of how he was raised all of his life, having access to anything and everything he desired. Now he journeys through the desert, and then he finds his wife and his father-in-law. When I say his wife, she wasn't his wife then, but she became his wife, and he stayed with them for 40 years. 40 years as a sheep herder. Like he was a sheep herder. He watched over the cattle and the sheep of Jethro. And he did that for 40 years. Totally different lifestyle than he was living throughout his initial the initial parts of his life. And during that time, he was called by the Lord for a purpose. As he was doing for 40 years, leading his sheep, herding the cattle, living in humble circumstances compared to what he lived before. His father Jethro was actually was actually pretty well off, but he still lived a totally different life. And during that life, what was happening? He was doing things that he hated. He hated compared to what he was doing before. He had everyone waiting hand and foot on him, but yet now he had to serve cattle. He had to lead sheep. Right? He had to shepherd all these animals. He had to work hard for his stay. And then when the Lord told him, I have a purpose for you. The purpose is you got to go back and free my people. What happened? He realizes that maybe this is what the Lord was preparing me for. I was doing something that I hated. He didn't, he hated in comparison to what he was doing before. He had a cushy lifestyle, right? He lived under Pharaoh, who was quote unquote God to everyone. He thought he was God, Pharaoh. There was nothing he couldn't do. And Moses was his son. Well, he was his grandson. So he was his grandson, and he was one who was in line to potentially be king. And so he had access to everything. And what did he have to do? He went back to Pharaoh to tell people to let God's people go. He went back through the desert to go against Pharaoh. How, like, that's something that Moses even showed us that he hated, even the thought of that. Can you imagine? I left here because I killed someone, and I know y'all wanted to kill me. Now I'm coming back as a shepherd to the most powerful man in the land, telling him that you got to let my people go. Why? Because God said so. I do not want to do this. He told God, he said, can't you choose someone else? He had all kinds of excuses, to the point where God actually was angry. And Moses was like, okay, God, I'm going to go. And he went. He had a choice not to, but he went. He went to do the thing that he hated. And what happened? Like, what was the success in that? Well, there were a lot of successes, but the bling was he freed between 2 and 3 million people. 2 and 3 million Israelites were freed from Egypt. He had a purpose that was far greater than himself. It was a purpose that he couldn't even envision for himself. He knew he had to trust in God. That's the reason why God said he was the most humble man to walk the face of the earth. Why? Because He had a direct relationship with God. He saw the face of God. No one could look upon God and yet live, but yet Moses got the opportunity to see God. He spoke to him audibly. And yet, when everybody who Moses was called to lead, to shepherd, to free, when Moses gave everything to give them everything, that they could have everything, they turned against him many, many times. And all those times that they turned against him, Moses had the opportunity to smite them. He had the opportunity to rain down fire on them. He had the opportunity to walk away. He had the opportunity to tell God, just even when God said, I'm going to wipe them out because I'm just tired of them. What did Moses do? Moses prayed for them. Moses continued to guide them and lead them. And in his relationship with the Lord loved him and blessed him by honoring his requests. What about you? What about us? Are we humble in that way, or are we prideful in another way? When we get the bling, or when God blesses us with the thing, with the ability to do the thing, to get the bling, do we turn from being humble, which is what got us there, to now we turn to pride? What is the word of God said? It says, pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before the fall. Arrogance before the fall. Pride before destruction. Arrogance, a haughty spirit before the fall. And so, are we that way? Do we become prideful where we start believing it was about how great we are and forget that if it's in our greatness, it's only going to go so far? Forget how we actually got there. Forget that God is the reason for it all. And when we continue to rest in him, what we think we're going to be able to achieve, we're going to see that ain't nothing compared to what God's going to achieve through us. Think about David. David has some great examples of how he had to, how he greatness was created through him, but yet through his pride and his haughtiness, there were some things that happened where David fell, and he fell multiple times. However, David is such a great example in doing the things that you hate to become the person that can do the thing to get the bling. David was one of the greatest examples. In fact, David was the person of David was mentioned more times in the Bible than anyone. David was mentioned so many times because of, just think of, what did God say with David? He said, David was a man after my own heart. David had fallen to pride and haughtiness more than enough times that it created so much strife in his life and in his family. But yet David didn't give up. And David is one of the great examples that God gave us of how to have a heart after God. And if you're willing to do the things, if you have a heart after God, like David didn't use this thing. He could have used this remote to click through all the stuff because David had access to everything. Like David started as a young boy, where he was the youngest of 8 brothers. He was the smallest. He was a shepherd. Is that shepherd theme coming? Like, do we understand? Do we see the correlation? The shepherd. Who else was a shepherd? Our greatest example, right? Our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ was a shepherd. Also, the lineage of Christ came through David. David's lineage. And the shepherd. Are you a shepherd? Think about yourself. Are you going through things where you're having to shepherd people, things, even like not just people and things, but what about your emotions? What about your finances? What about your family? What about your household? Your household. What about your demeanor? What about your relationship with the Lord? Are you having to shepherd those things? Meaning you have to watch over those things? Like, are you finding yourself doing things that you really hate in order to get to the destination? Well, I want to encourage you and let you know that maybe that is the destination. That's the most important part of the destination. Why? Because as I'm going to show you, as I talk to you about a few things with David and share a couple of scriptures, how that is the reason, the journey, and you being that shepherd, doing the things that you hate most, are the things that are preparing you so that God can give you the ability to do the thing, to get the bling. And the bling of what? All the vision he's given you for your life, for your family, for your descendants. That's the bling. Is it the peace that surpasses all understanding? Well, you should have that already, because that's part of the fruit of the Spirit. It ain't about, do you got $1 million now? If God's giving you vision to have millions of dollars, well, if that's a vision he gave you, then it will come to pass. He will provide that if you're willing to do the things that you hate most, things that don't feel good. Be willing to not click through those things so that you could just get right to it. Because if you get right to it, the problem is it ain't gonna last. That's what happened with Jim Carrey. He got right to it, but yet he became a father, a husband, and an executive, and none of those things were working. They didn't work well. He didn't have joy in those things. The people who he was affecting didn't have joy in those things. Why? Because he just clicked through it all. He clicked through the things that allowed him to become the person and allowed the people around him to become the people who can do the thing, that have the ability to do the things, to have the bling, which is what? Again, that life of joy and peace and prosperity. What does God tell us? His plans for us are not to harm us. His plans are not for evil. His plans are to prosper us, to give us hope in a future, for peace, to give us hope in a future, right? In anything we're doing, like there's one thing when I look at my affirmations, my own personal affirmations, when I look at when I look at the things that are a non-negotiable, and there's one thing that's a non-negotiable. There's other things on there that's not negotiable. My relationship with the Lord, that's a non-negotiable. I don't care how much success. If he's not in it, I don't want it. Right? So that's a non-negotiable. My relationship with my wife, it's a non-negotiable. As a husband, I'm called to serve her, to love her as Christ loved the church. If I can't do that, then it's a non-negotiable. It must be. And if I can't be the man that helps her to be the woman of God that he calls her to be, then it's a non-negotiable. Like, I don't care how much success. If I can't do that, I don't want it. But then here's another non-negotiable: my peace. The peace, if I can't have peace in the thing that I'm doing, and all the things that I'm doing, whether it be my family, whether it be my business, whether it be helping people, if I can't have peace in the things that I'm doing, it's a non-negotiable. I shouldn't be doing them. It's a non-negotiable. Why? Because it's one of the things in the fruit that is important. And I desire to have all the fruit, the whole tree. What is the fruit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If I can't have all those things while I'm doing the thing, then I'm doing something wrong. I don't want the bling without the thing, without those things, without the fruit. I don't want it. Right? And why? Because you should have that fruit regardless if you have the bling. If you don't have the fruit, the joy of the Lord is our strength. If we don't have the fruit, then when we don't have the bling, then we ain't gonna have it when we got it, because the bling doesn't give us the fruit. The fruit is grown through the nourishment of the journey, right? The nourishment that comes from the journey. So think about David. So David, he was anointed by Samuel. He after he was anointed, what did he do? He went right back to the field to shepherd the sheep. He didn't go straight to the throne. He had to go through that and learn how to use the slingshot while he was killing animals and killing birds and doing different things. He had to learn his skills. He had to learn how to shepherd the flock. He had to, once he got anointed with the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God came upon him when he got anointed by Samuel, preparing him for his ability to do the thing, to lead the people, right? And so then what did he have to do? He had to wait. He waited, and he waited humbly. What else did he do? He ended up slaying Goliath. Now, when he slayed Goliath, like, Goliath was the giant that everyone was afraid of. Not David. David wasn't even a soldier, but yet David, when Goliath spoke against the God of the heavens and the earth, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when Goliath wanted to defile the name of the living God, David said, "How dare you?" He ran against Goliath, and he used the slingshot that he had to use all these years growing up as a shepherd, protecting his sheep, and he killed Goliath. He became doing the things that he hated. Because, I mean, I don't know. I can't necessarily say he hated it, but let me ask you, what if someone said to you, you just won the lottery? You just won $100 million. Like, just think about this for a second, because that's essentially what happened with David. You just won the lottery. You just got anointed. You are going to be the king of Israel, the next king of Israel. What would you do? And then they said, but before you get the lottery, it's already there, but now you got to wait for the next 15 years to get there. What would you do? What if someone said you got to wait for another year? And in fact, I'm going to make you go to work and do the job that you might like, a job that you may not really, really like. But you got to get even better at the job that you don't like, because that's going to prepare you for you being able to manage your inheritance. What would you do? Like, how hard would that be? And then you find out maybe it's another year and another year and another year. You just don't know. And then finally, when you get the check, all your family members want to kill you. How about that part? Now, all your family, your kids, they want to kill you. Your kids, you bless them and giving them like you segmented parts. When you get the check, you've given them pieces of the check. You help them to become the person that can help you in in the kingdom. And what do? They turn against you and they want to kill you. The people that you've hired to help, they like, just chaos begins. This is what happened with David's kingdom. His Saul wanted to kill him. We all know that part. He had to run from Saul. Then with he then became king after Saul died. And what happened? Then he messed up. He had a baby. He saw this beautiful woman that wasn't one of his concubines. She was actually married to one of his soldiers. And he saw this beautiful woman, Bathsheba, and he said, "Bring her to me." He had a baby with Bathsheba, and to cover it up, he killed her husband, Uriah. So because of that, that was kind of like him clicking the button on the remote to go through what he had to go through. He tried to hide it, but David couldn't hide it. God said, he sent Nathan to David and said, "Hey, this was a really, really bad thing. That baby that you just had won't live. And there's always going to be strife in your home from now on." And David didn't make excuses. He asked for forgiveness. And so in the strife that he had to go through is something that none of us would want. Like, think about what happened. His son raped his daughter, and then his other son, who knew about it, killed the other son. And then the son that killed the other son had to leave the kingdom. And then eventually David forgave him and brought him back. And that son got prideful, wasn't humble, was prideful. And what did he do? He used all the things that his father had given him, the people that he had called him to serve. He used those people to gain notoriety for himself, and then turn the people against his father. And his father actually left the kingdom. He turned the people to kill his father and take over the throne. He wanted to click through. The general eventually, the closest person to him, his greatest general, ended up killing his son. While he was on the run from his son, instead of what he did, David could have easily, what could have David done? He could have been prideful and said, "You know what? Just get rid of my son." He could have been prideful when it came to Saul, because when he was on the run from Saul, who also wanted to kill him, when all he wanted to do was bless Saul, Saul was jealous and wanted to kill him. And David 2 times had the opportunity to kill Saul. And instead of killing him, he blessed him. Instead of killing his son, he blessed him with grace and mercy. While he was on the run, there was this other guy called Shimei who saw David. And while he was on the run from his son, instead of killing his son, instead of wiping his son out and all the people who he had turned against him, David said, "No, I'm just going to leave." I'm going to leave the king. He ran like he was a scared dog, you would have thought. And you got to realize who David was. Like David wasn't, he wasn't like a scared dog. Realize what he did with 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 Goliath. Realize the song that they wrote about him. Saul slays thousands, but David slays tens of thousands. Like David was the ultimate warrior. But yet, and he could have just wiped all that stuff out. But what did he do? He left. Some people might call him a punk. Right? You could have. David the punk. Right? David the punk. I never thought about that. David the punk. David wasn't a punk. He did not get punked. We'll talk about that in just a second as we wrap this up. And then this guy, as he was on the journey, this other guy, Shammai, is like, started cursing him. Oh, yeah, now look at you, you punk. He said, look at you now. Yeah, your son's going to kill you and you're going to be a dead dog. Yeah, like he was taunting him. And one of David's boys was like, wait, Abishai, he was like, King, can I just go over here and take this man's head off? Because like he does not deserve to live. And David was like, no, that's not like, yeah, we could do that, but if that's what God wanted, God wouldn't have allowed, if that's what God didn't want, if he wanted me to do that, he wouldn't allow that man to even open up his mouth. So it must be God's plan, so let it be. Why didn't he kill Saul? He says, because Saul was an anointed man of God, and it's not my position to put my hands on the anointed man of God. Right? So David had a heart after God. His heart was to please God. Even in the mistakes, even when he was had to go through all the trials, the people that he had around him who he continued to bless. When David, when finally Joab killed Absalom, David's son, who was trying to take the throne, and David returned back to Jerusalem, back to the throne, this guy, Shammai, was still there. And they were like, and he had all these other people that were there that had turned against David with his son. And they said, okay, should we kill these people? What did David say? No. He said, no, if it was God's plan, then I'll let God handle it. However, even after all of that, what happened? David still had to go through some trials. He still had to wait and do some things. He still also ended up with some pridefulness. What did he do? He ended up counting all of his men. He sent Joab to do a census of all the men. He wanted to know, how many people do we got? And God's like, it's not your job to do all that. Because you ain't got the people because of you. And it's not the people that wins the battles. It's me that wins the battles. So he had to humble him again. And because of that mistake, 70,000 people died in 3 days. So he had to do that. And then the last thing he had to go through was one of his last sons tried to take the throne again. David was on his deathbed and his son was trying to take the throne. No, that was not who was the son I was anointing to take over the throne. It was who? It was Solomon, not Adonijah. And he tried to take the throne. He turned his men against him again. Hit this son, another son, turned David's men against him to anoint him and make the people think that he was the next king. He was on his deathbed and all this stuff was happening. David had blessed all his kids and all these people, but yet they still turned against him. And instead of having him murdered or killed or banished, all David did was he didn't. He came and he blessed his son Solomon, and he left it in the Lord's hands. And so I say all this because with all this stuff happening, there's many opportunities we could take matters into our own hands. And in those opportunities that we're taking matters into our own hands, the question is that what God is calling us to do? We're taking matters into our own hands because we desire to what? We desire to maybe click through to avoid the stuff that doesn't feel good. When the journey is the success, because what God is doing through us, to us, as He's and through us in the journey, what He's doing, allowing to be done to us, so He can do through us what He's given us vision for, what He has vision for. That's so much greater than anything we can do for us, for ourselves. Right? So the scripture that I want to read to you, if you'll just hang out with me for a few more minutes, it just shows how after David went through all of that stuff, the things that he had to say. And when you see this is going to help you to understand. It's in 2 Samuel 22. And it's going to help you to understand how to remain in the journey to do the things that you hate in order to be able to become the person that's able to do the thing so that you can get the bling, so that your kids can get the bling, so that your descendants, your great grandkids can get the bling. Right? By honoring him. This is what David said in 22. It says, then David spoke to the Lord the words of this song on the day when the Lord had delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, the God of my strength, in whom I will trust, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold and my refuge, my Savior. You save me from violence. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. When the waves of death surrounded me, the floods of ungodliness made me afraid, the sorrows of Sheol surrounded me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon the Lord and I cried out to my God. He heard my voice from his temple and my cry entered his ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of heaven quaked and were shaken because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils and devouring fire from his mouth. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also, and he came down with darkness under his feet. He rode upon the cherub and flew, and he was seen upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness canopies around him. Dark waters and thick clouds of the sky from the brightness before him, coals of fire were kindled. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice. He sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning bolts, and he vanquished them. Then the channels of the sea were seen. The foundations of the world were uncovered at the rebuke of the Lord, at the blasts of the breath of his nostrils. He sent from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy, from those who hated me, for they were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He also brought me out into a broad place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. The Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to his cleanness, according to the cleanness of my hands. He has recompensed me, for I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his judgments were before me, and for his statutes I did not depart. I did not depart from them. I was also blameless before him, and I kept myself from iniquity. Therefore, the Lord recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his eyes. With the merciful, with the merciful, you will show yourself merciful. With a blameless man, you will show yourself blameless. With the pure, you will show yourself pure. And with the devious, you will show yourself shrewd. You will save the humble people, but your eyes are on the haughty, that you may bring them down. For you are my light, O Lord. The Lord shall enlighten my darkness. For you, by you, I can run against the troop. By my God, I can leap over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The way of the Lord is proven. He is a shield to all who trust him. For who is God except the Lord? For who is a rock except our God? God is my strength and my power, and he makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war so that my arms can bend the bow of bronze. You have also given me the shield of your salvation. Your gentleness has made me great. You enlarged my path under me so my feet do not slip. I have pursued my enemies and destroyed them. Neither did I turn back again till they were destroyed. And I have destroyed them and wounded them so that they could not rise. They have fallen under my feet. For you have armed me with strength for the battle. You have subdued under me those who rose against me. You have also given me necks of my enemies so that I destroyed those who hated me. They looked, but there was none to save, even the Lord, but he did not answer them. Then I beat them as fine as the dust of the earth. I trod them like dirt in the streets, and I spread them out. You have also delivered me from the strivings of my people. You have kept me as the head of the nations. A people I have not known shall serve me. The foreigners submit to me. As soon as they hear, they obey me. The foreigners fade away and come frightened from their hideouts. The Lord lives. Blessed be my rock. Let God be exalted, the rock of my salvation. It is God who avenges me and subdues the people under me. He delivers me from my enemies. You also lift me up above those who rise against me. You have delivered me from the violent man. Therefore, I give you thanks. I give thanks to you, O Lord, among the Gentiles. I sing praises to your name. He is the tower of salvation, his king, and shows mercy to his anointed, to David and his descendants forevermore. Those were the words of David after God had done all these things. And that's the reason why he's able to stand through doing the things that most of us would hate. Being the one who's willing to do the thing that most people aren't willing to do for a short time in his life, so that he can do the things that most people will never be able to do for the rest of his life. And if that was David's heart, if that's how he saw God, and that's how God saw him, how could he not succeed? How could he not go through the journey? The journey is the destination. The journey is the success. Without him going through the journey, he would never have a relationship with God in a way that he could voice his words so clearly that it would encourage people for thousands and thousands and thousands of years to come to do what? To be able to just stand and let God do the work that God does, so that you can do the work he's calling you to do. So with that, I want to wrap it up and just say success is not the destination. It is the journey. In order to get here, we all have to do the things that we hate. But by doing the things that we hate, we'll get to do the things that we love. And we'll get to be with the ones who we love while we're doing the things that we love. And I just want to encourage you that don't be like Adam, clicking through life and ending up with a world that you created where you're not the person. It becomes flawed because you didn't really become the person that's able to do the thing. So everything around you is going to be flawed, and you won't have the peace. You won't have the fruit. You won't have that relationship because of the transformation that you were going through in the journey. Don't be afraid to go through the journey to get the thing, to be able to do the thing to get the bling. And with that, I just want to encourage you. If this was helpful, subscribe to the channel. If it was helpful, share it, comment, and more importantly, if it was helpful, implement. Stand firm in your journey, but not firm in you, firm in the rock that can't be broken, the rock of Jesus Christ. Stand firm in your walk with God and let him do amazing things in your life. Things where you're that along with me and others that are surrounding you in prayer and encouragement, where you're going to be able to speak those same words about your relationship and what God did for you, as David did so eloquently, where in your world, the world that God created in you and your family and the people he's calling you to touch, they're going to be able to hear and listen to your words about him and know that he is real. And finally, I'll just say, when we all do that, we'll be able to hear the words that we desire to hear most when it's all said and done, but also throughout the journey. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Well done. So God bless you, and I'll see you on the next video.